When Jesus came to the world, he provided undeniable evidence that he was the Messiah. He healed the sick, made the deaf hear, enabled the lame to walk, healed lepers, and even resurrected the dead. All of this before the Jewish leaders who, by the way, had access to all the Old Testament prophecies about the Messiah. And yet, despite all this evidence, they rejected Jesus as the Messiah. So we ask ourselves, why don't Jews believe in Jesus? Even with all the evidence, the Jewish people rejected and continue to reject Jesus primarily because he did not fulfill all the biblical prophecies about the Messiah during his first coming. We know that several Old Testament prophecies were fulfilled by Jesus in his first coming. He was born of a virgin, as prophesied by Isaiah, in Bethlehem, as prophesied by Micah. His triumphal entry into Jerusalem on a donkey was foretold by Zechariah, and he was betrayed for 30 pieces of silver, also as Zechariah had prophesied. However, there were other prophecies from the Old Testament that Jesus did not fulfill during his first coming, which were precisely the ones the Jewish leaders most longed for. They expected the Messiah to reign with an iron scepter, as Psalm 2 verses 6 through 9 describes, and to bring about the peace mentioned in Isaiah 2 verse 4, where swords would be turned into plowshares and nations would not learn war anymore. Roy B. Zuck, in the book Biblical Interpretation, explains that the prophets often saw the two comings of Christ as if they were the peaks of two mountains separated by a valley. They saw the peaks, but not the valleys, the time gap between the fulfillments. Unlike us who see the time separating the first and second comings of Christ, they viewed it as a continuous event. For instance, in Isaiah 61 verses 1 and 2, when Jesus read this passage in the synagogue at Nazareth, he stopped at, "to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor," and did not continue with, "and the day of vengeance of our God," a clear reference to his return. Thus, when Jesus came and did not fulfill all the Old Testament prophecies about the Messiah in his first coming, the Jews thought and continued to think that he could not be the Messiah. They still await the Messiah to build the third temple. Another major reason for the Jewish people's rejection of Jesus as the Messiah was his apparent disregard for the temple. The Jews not only hoped that the Messiah would restore Israel from Roman hands, but also believed he would renew Israel's spiritual life. The temple was central to this experience. However, Jesus came and predicted the temple's destruction, which indeed happened decades later in 70 AD. He pronounced this curse because the true center of the relationship between God and man had shifted to himself, causing great distress among the Jews. They could not believe in a Messiah who would say such things. So when Jesus was arrested, one of the main false accusations against him was that he had threatened to profane the Holy Temple. Additionally, Jews today still await the Messiah to build the third temple. The third reason for the Jewish rejection of Jesus was that he challenged many of their religious teachings and traditions. In Matthew 15, when scribes and Pharisees questioned why his disciples transgressed the tradition of the elders by not washing their hands before eating, Jesus replied that they too transgress God's commandment because of their traditions. He demonstrated how their system of adding to God's word actually undermined the authority of the commandment to honor one's father and mother. The Jews were offended when Jesus combated their traditions, which they held with almost the same authority as the Scriptures. Jesus was also seen as a blasphemer by the Jews. Central to Jewish faith is the Shema from Deuteronomy 6:4. "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." Jews learn and recite this prayer from a young age, morning and night. Jesus, however, claimed to be God when he said, "Before Abraham was, I am," in John 8:58, directly linking himself to the divine name revealed in Exodus 3.
The Jewish leaders understood this as Jesus placing himself on par with God and sought to stone him for blasphemy. Another overlooked reason for the Jewish rejection of Jesus was that he was not who they expected. In Matthew 13:54-57, it is said that while teaching in the synagogue, all were amazed and asked, "Where did this man get this wisdom and these miraculous powers? Isn't this the carpenter's son? We know his mother Mary and his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas." They couldn't see authority in someone who appeared to be a simple man from their midst, as Isaiah also prophesied that Jesus would not have any beauty or majesty that would attract people. Lastly, the unbelief of the Jews was in part a divine judgment for their hardened hearts. John's Gospel states that despite all the miracles Jesus performed, the Jews still did not believe, fulfilling Isaiah's prophecy that God had blinded their eyes and hardened their hearts, so they could not see, understand, or turn to him for healing. This should not be misconstrued as God manipulating innocent people. Rather, it was a holy condemnation of a guilty people who had chosen to reject the truth. In summary, the Jews rejected Jesus because they were focused on material expectations. They expected a Messiah wealthy from a prominent family, while Jesus was poor and from a humble background. They anticipated physical beauty and majesty, but Jesus had none. They hoped for a Messiah who would respect and exalt the physical temple, yet Jesus showed that the temple would now be his spiritual body. They sought freedom from the Romans, but Jesus offered freedom from sin. They looked for earthly peace, but Jesus brought peace with God. The reasons for the Jewish people's rejection of Jesus are many, but at the core, it was because they were looking for material deliverance, while Jesus offered spiritual salvation.